Hey now everybody, it's Vernon from Reptilia Exotica. Today we are going to show you guys how to make an arboreal snake enclosure for, quarantining purposes or for temporary purposes for juvenile, or even, if you're on a budget and you need multiple snake enclosures, how to get this done in an economical way, something that'll look really cool and something that will be relatively inexpensive for you to make on your own in probably about an hour. So what we're going to use is a Rubbermaid All-Access storage tote. This is a large size, and the dimensions are 22 by 17 by 15 high. So it's 22 inches wide, 17 deep, and 15 inches high. This is the large one and probably going to be the most versatile for whatever your purpose may be. The cool thing about these guys is that they have a lid that opens on top, but then also they have the drop down clear lid on the front, so you're going to be able to see your animal inside the enclosure, as well as get access and do maintenance and cleaning and things like that without having to take the top lid off. And what's the significance of that? That means basically you're going to be able to stack these guys as high as you want, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 high, without having to take off the lid to gain access. So it's going to give you a lot of versatility, modularity. If you want to talk about just being able to add on to a system, if you have multiple animals to care for and you need to house them all separately. So we're going to go ahead and get started, show you what you need to get this build done. First and foremost, what you're going to need is a Rubbermaid All-Access bin. We're using the large size, but you could really get away with any size you want if you were planning on keeping a smaller species or space was an issue or something like that. What I've done already is I've gone and installed an LED lighting system on the lid like this. I'm going to make an entire video on how to do this, but I'm going to do that video separately, because it's a little bit more of a complicated and technical process, and it's really not required for this build. So I'm going to link to that video later on in this one, and we will cover that entire process of how to wire this and how to wire them together in sequence so that you can connect multiple enclosures together. But we'll do that in a separate video. The really interesting thing about these is the versatility and the way that we can assemble this. Using different size perches and actually, being able to customize everything in here. And you don't have to do things this way. We've just found that this particular bin is a great way to inexpensively be able to quarantine or house your animals. Next, you're going to want to choose some different diameters of PVC or PEX tubing. This is a piece of PEX, and I got it because it was the smallest diameter that I could find that I could still get fittings for. The next two sizes are actually Schedule 40 PVC pipe, and the reason that I chose different sizes was because we're going to be able to do this enclosure in a way that allows you to increase the size of the perch as your snake gets larger. So you're not going to have one size perch that you're married to for the entire life of the enclosure, and that's going to give you some versatility. You're also going to be able to configure them however you want and still be able to go up in size as your snake gets bigger, which is really nice. It doesn't mean there's not a whole lot of work that you're going to have to do once your little juvenile becomes a sub-adult and then an adult. The next thing you will need is some end caps for your PVC pipes. We're going to do in this video 2 perches at different heights within the enclosure. So we're going to need 4 end caps for each diameter perch that you plan to use. You don't have to make them all at the same time, but you're going to need at least 4 for the diameter pipe that you're planning on using for this build. Some 3M command strip mini hooks. These are clear, but you could use white, or if you could find black to match, totally up to you. Some 1 1/8 inch or 2.8 centimeter screw eyes. These are size V2012, and I found that these work the best for slipping over the hook part of the command hook. Some black tab mounted 2-inch louvered vents for airflow. A little 10-ounce COUP cup. The cool thing about these is that you can easily mount these to the side, and the stainless steel cup is removable. It's going to be a lot more sanitary, and it's able to change. You're able to change the water out really easily and quickly. Also, you can mount this at any height inside the enclosure so that you can make sure your little guy has access to water at all times. I've kind of gone back and forth on this next part. The Rubbermaid All-Access front door is pretty secure, and it's sort of a complicated operation to open the front. But if you want to make absolutely sure that your enclosure is secure, you're going to need to secure it with something. These frame clips will probably do the trick if we mount them correctly. So we're going to do a little experimentation, and as long as they're not, I don't really want them to interrupt the flow of the look of the front of the enclosure. So we'll assess the situation and see if we even need these. As far as tools go, you're going to need some pretty basic stuff. A cordless or corded hand drill, a hacksaw or a chop box power saw. You can get this done with hand tools, but just for speed's sake, I'm going to be using an electric miter box. You're also going to need a hole saw. For our particular vents, we're going to need a 2-inch hole saw, but I actually found this multi-pack at the hardware store. It was less expensive than just buying one, specifically sized bit, and it happens to have the right hole saw size inside. You don't need anything super fancy for this. I mean, we're just going through the side of a plastic enclosure, so basically anything will do. Some 100% silicone sealant and a caulk gun to go with it. I'm a big fan of 100% silicone. Anything that you find, if you look at the ingredients and it doesn't have any sort of anti-mildew or mold inhibiting agent in it, it's going to be just fine for your reptiles once it's cured, as long as it's 100% silicone and nothing else. And you can figure that out just by looking at the label. Tape measure, obviously, for making measurements. Measure twice, cut once, I always say. This is all you're going to need for this particular build. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll show you how to put it together. So the first thing we're going to do is figure out exactly where we want to mount our 2-inch louvered vents. The Rubbermaid All-Access has got an interesting little lip here where air can flow underneath. It's not a huge gap, but there's definitely air that's going to flow underneath this and inside the enclosure. So I think the best place to mount these vents is somewhere on the upper rear of the enclosure on both sides. That's going to probably be able to pull some air, through this front vent and up and out the back. So let's go ahead and get started. I actually forgot to mention earlier, you're going to want to double check the size of your hole saw and make sure that it's going to be big enough. This is actually it's a 2-inch vent, but I needed a 2 1/8 inch hole saw bit. You're going to want to make sure that it fits inside. Here, see the flange here. That's going to allow us to mount it still, but now our hole is going to be big enough because this is the part here that we want to sit flush against the back. So we got a 2-inch vent, and we needed a 2 1/8 inch hole saw to make the hole big enough. So in case you've never worked with them before, the way these hole saws work is there's a little oblong hole in the back of the hole saw bit, and then you've got an actual drill bit that's got a matching piece that fits right inside of there, just like that. And you're also going to have a nut that's going to come down right over top. And hand tight might be fine, but you really don't want this to loosen while you're drilling. So we're going to take a pair of needle nose and just cinch it down really good. Now we're going to make our measurements. I believe we're going to place equally about right here and right here on either side. Obviously this is going to be facing this way so that our louvers are on the inside, but you get the idea. The great thing about these too is that you've got a ton of reference points. When you go to make your measurements, there's lots of places that you can measure from to make sure that you're symmetrical on both sides. So like I said before, one of the other cool things about these is that there's all kinds of little reference points that you can use. I've actually chosen to make my center points 1 3/4 of an inch down from this lip, and then 7 inches from this little crease. I don't know if you can see it. There it is. This little crease right here. So there's all sorts of neat reference points to make sure that everything lines up just perfectly. Here, that wasn't so bad. Gotta clean these holes up a bit. Peel some of this stuff off. But before I get too crazy, we want to check the fit and make sure our little louvered vents actually go inside this hole. It's a perfect fit. Now we're going to go ahead and clean up these holes a little bit. I'm probably just going to use a knife to kind of scrape them out, get all these little plastic burrs off. If you can get it with your fingernails, you might as well just do that. So I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but I'm kind of a nut job when it comes to doing things, and really I go overboard almost all the time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use some rubbing alcohol to prep the surface around the holes, because I want to make sure I get a really good bond. I'm going to actually use some silicone sealant, even though these are tab mounted. I'm going to use a little bit of silicone sealant just around this edge here, just to make sure that I get a good seal and that these don't go anywhere. Like I said, I'm kind of a nut job. So the instructions on the command strips say to leave them for about an hour or so after they've been applied to give the adhesive some time to cure. So we're going to leave, we've got all 4 of our perch hooks placed, so we're going to leave those dry for about an hour. In the meantime, we're going to take some measurements and get our pieces of PVC pipe cut. Now, I've found that as a good rule of thumb, you're going to want to cut, you're going to want to measure the distance between your perches, which in this case from hook to hook is 17 inches, almost right on the nose. So you're going to take that dimension and you're going to subtract about 1 3/8 inches from your measurement. So this distance is 17 inches. We're going to subtract 1 3/8 inches, which would be 15 5/8 inches. So what you're going to do is cut your piece 1 3/8 inches approximately less than your side-to-side dimension, and that's for the front and for the back. These are probably going to be different. I've got 17 here and 16 and 3/4 here on the bottom. So when you get your Schedule 40 PVC pipe, it's going to look like this, and it's going to have some lettering on it. You know, I'm not really too sure if this is toxic, or you know, if it would just come off over time or what, but I just took the time to take a bit of sandpaper and just rub that right off. Just a little sanding block will do the trick. It takes about literally 2 minutes to do just a little regular sanding block. So we have our 17-inch dimension. We're going to go cut a piece to 15 5/8 for the front, and assuming your dimensions are the same as mine, then we're going to cut one at 15 3/8 for the front. Now after those are cut, you're going to have one piece that's longer than the other by about 1/4 of an inch. So this one's going to be for the front, this one's going to be for the back, like so. Then you're going to take your little PVC cap and just do yourself a favor and draw a little, or drill a little pilot hole in the center there. That's about a 1/16 of an inch hole, but that's going to be just enough for us to take our little eye hook, or our little eye screw, see, and get it started inside there. You could probably do this without drilling it, but trust me, you'll be glad that you drilled a pilot hole. This is going to be a lot easier. Just going to take it, start threading it down. It's probably going to get a little difficult at some point to begin to thread it all the way in. So I just grab a pair of needle nose, just crank it down. So with the measurements that I've made, I made those measurements based on cranking this down so that the threads are no longer showing, like so. See that? Threads are no longer showing, and we're going to do this for all 4 caps that we have, so they all look kind of like this. The cool thing is that this is going to be a little bit adjustable. This isn't the be-all, end-all. The great thing is that you can twist this more or back it out, and you can increase or decrease the length of the perch, essentially, between your points here, which is going to be nice. So right now is also a really good time to figure out how you're feeling about the edges of your caps and these pesky little labels that are on there. Once again, if you feel anything even relatively sharp, you're going to want to hit it with some sandpaper. And these, you can probably get away with getting a contractor pack of these caps and not have to worry about these barcodes on here. But if you don't have that, or you're really good at peeling labels like I am, I'm pretty much the label peeling master, you can just peel those right off. So now, put our end caps on. Let's go ahead and dry fit everything into place. See how it fits. Back perch. Nice and snug. Front perch. Probably be a little bit more snug. So we're going to go ahead and tighten this end just a bit. About 1/2 turn should do it. You're basically just going to make sure that both of the eyelids are kind of facing the same way, otherwise you're going to get a lot of wobble. Maybe just a tad bit more. And there you have it. So now the only thing left to do is to install the COUP cup. And I think a really good idea is to kind of put it perch level. You know, where it's be a good spot, not, you know, right next to both of the perches, where your little guy can get some water. And then probably you're going to want to put some water down in the bottom for humidity, and also for, they tend to use their water bowls like a toilet. So we'll
go ahead and get this COUP cup installed, and that's going to be almost it. Basically decided that you're way better off safe than sorry, so I'm going to take this little flush mount window clip and put it right there so that it'll turn up, so when it's down it'll prevent the lid from being opened at all. Flip it up, open the lid. And I'm actually going to put the inside of the screw inside of the enclosure because I don't want there to be any sharp edges anywhere inside. So we're going to go ahead and put the screw inside. So now essentially what we've got is a little safety lock. Flip it up, put it away. Bada bing. Close. Cinch perfectly. Alright, so now we've got our perches in and everything looks pretty good. The one thing is though is that I'm not really too crazy about these little doohickeys here. So I'm probably going to cut those off and then run just a tiny bead of silicone around the edges just to seal everything up and make sure that it's nice and tight. It says ½ pound each. I mean, these things can take plenty of weight, I'm sure, especially when it's distributed like this, but I'm going to go ahead and silicone that anyways. Like I said, this step is completely optional, but I'm a total freak when it comes to this kind of thing. Now you want to make sure that if you do decide to silicone the hooks on, that you wait for at least 24 hours before you introduce any animals into the enclosure, just to make sure the curing process is finished. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to do is cut a little notch in the back here for this wire to go through. It doesn't have to be a hole, just a little notch, just enough so that the wire can get through without getting pinched. So I want to make sure, feed the wire back like so. So we need to remember that this is going to be flipped upside down, and so I'm going to want the wire to be approximately here. Make a little mark right there. I'm going to take a Dremel, or you could probably even do it with a utility knife or whatever, and just make a little notch there. Alright, there, that's it. Doesn't need to be anything fancy. It's going to be covered up anyway. Just want to make sure there's no sharp edges. So then, I'm going to take our lid, so, just carefully feed the wiring through. Boop. Lid's on, just like that. That's how the wire looks. Coming through the back. Just like that. Plug it in. Take a look. There, it's secure. That's it. Once again, we will do another video on exactly how to do the lighting and how to basically have a little controller that can control all these effects. You probably don't want to do any of these weird effects like this. It'll give your poor little snake a freaking seizure. But it's really neat to have the automatic dimmer on there. I think that that is a pretty substantial amount of light for an enclosure. The video is kind of making the light look weird. It's a 6500K. We get about 750 lumens in there, so it's going to be plenty bright at 100%. I think even 50% is pretty bright. So make sure you slam the like button, the subscribe button. If you have any questions, hit me up for sure. If you don't, hope to see you next time. And I'm going to link to all the things that we used in this video down in the comments. So, catch you on the next one. The next video will be how to set up the wiring for the lid so that you can have a setup that looks like this. Baba booey to y'all.
Somebody drop down the song. Me?
Oh my.